Srimad, His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Puri Rajagacharya Soter Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Govindam Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Chaitra Puri Dham ki, Ganga Maya ki, Yamuna Maya ki, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki, Harinam Sankirtan ki, Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki, Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitya Gaura Premanande. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namaste, Jivanandaya, Dasaya, Vanachani, Prabhupada, Valavaya, Sima, Silavanaya, Jnana Granta Gavinam, Pashtuti Patitadmanam, Jnana Gurute, Chitavini, Chakshashena, Mahanamo, Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Krishnaya, Bhutale, Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nidhi Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvishesha Shanimari Pastadishtari Om Ajnanatamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopaka Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavani Ishvare Visubhana Suti Devi Paramami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Kabando Matsangin Madguro Manmadana Madnistara Agya Marananda Namostite Asadu Sadhu Tadayanati Nicho Tata Karahana Muncha Karachinmam Premna Utkatayos Buddha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Naranam Namaskata Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Madhuraye Nastapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttamashloke Bhaktir Babadi Naishtaki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 30, text number 49. Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kala Vidrute Yasasarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daiva Chodita Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kala Vidrute Yasasarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daiva Chodita Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kala Vidrute Yasasarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daiva Chodita Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte Praksarge Kala Vidrute Yasasarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daiva Chodita
Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte
Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte
Praksarge Kala Vidrute
Praksarge Kala Vidrute
Yasasarja Praja Ishta
Yasasarja Praja Ishta
Sadaksho Daiva Chodita
Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte
Chakshushe Tvantare
Prapte
Praksarge Kala Vidrute
Praksarge Kala Vidrute Yasasarja Praja Ishta Sadaksho Daiva Chodita
Chakshushe Tvanture Prapte.
Chakshushe Tvanture Prapte.
Praksarge Kala Vitrute.
Praksarge Kala Vitrute.
Sarja Prajayishta.
Yasa Sarja Prajayishta. Sadaksho Daiva Chodita. Chakshushe Tvantare Prapte. Praksarge Kala Vidrite. Yasa Sarja Prajayishta. Sadaksho Daiva Chodita. Word for word. Chakshushe. Named Chakshusha. To. But. Antare. The Manva Avatara. Prapte. When it happened. Prak. Previous. Sarge. Creation. Kala Vidrute. Destroyed in due course of time. Yaha. One who. Sasarja. Created. Prajaha. Living entities. Ishtaha. Desirable. Saha. He. Dakshaha. Daksha. Daiva. By the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Choditaha. Inspired. Translation. His previous body had been destroyed, but he, the same Daksha, inspired by the Supreme Will, created all the desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. Please repeat. His previous body had been destroyed. But he, the same Daksha, inspired by the Supreme Will, created all the desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Sahasra Yuga Paryanta Aharyad Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam Teho Ratra Vido Janaha. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together is the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. Brahma's one day consists of 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas, Satya, Treta, Dwarpa, and Kali. In that one day, there are 14 Manvantaras. And out of these Manvantaras, this Chakshusha Manvantara is the 6th. The various Manus existing in one day of Lord Brahma are as follows: Swayambhuva, Sorochisha, Uttama, Tamasa, Vaivata, Chakshusha, Vaivashwata, Savrani, Daksha Savrani, Brahma Savrani, Dharma Savrani, Rudra Savrani, Deva Savrani, and Indra Savrani. Thus there are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma. In a year there are 5,040 Manus. Brahma has to live for 100 years. Consequently, the total of Manus appearing and disappearing in the life of one Brahma is 504,000. This is the calculation for one universe, and there are innumerable universes. All these Manus come and go simply by the breathing process of Mahavishnu, as stated in Brahma Samhita. Yasyai kanisha shitakala matabalambya jivanti loma vijala jagadanandanata Vishnur Mahamsa ihayasya kala vishesho gokundamari purusham tamam bhajami. The word Jagadanandanata means Lord Brahma. There are innumerable Jagadanandana Brahmas, and thus we can calculate the many Manus. The present age is under the control of Vaivashvata Manu. Each Manu lives 4,320,000 years, multiplied by 71. The present Manu has already lived 4,320,000 years, multiplied by 28. All these lifespans are ultimately ended by the laws of material nature. The controversy of the Daksha Yajna took place in the Swayambhuva Manvantara. As a result, Daksha was punished by Lord Shiva. But by virtue of his penance, By virtue of his prayers to Lord Shiva, he became eligible to regain his former opulence. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Daksha underwent severe penances out to the 5th Manvantar. Thus, at the beginning of the 6th Manvantar, known as Chakshusha Manvantar, Daksha regained his former opulence by the blessings of Lord Shiva. Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam is so nectar, it's really so beautiful to, just have the opportunity to study it, to just think about it, and to, I say that prayer by Sanatana Goswami, Mareka Bandho Matsam, again, you're my only friend, you're my only companion. Madguru Man Mahadana, you're my spiritual master and my greatest wealth. Mad Nistarakar Mad Bhagya, you're my greatest fortune and my deliverer. Madhanandan Mosten, you're my source of ecstasy. And if we read Bhagavatam and we hear Bhagavatam and we get to live in the spiritual world in our mind, it's like a festival every day for the soul. Brought some books with me because this is a very technical topic, but we can try to extract the nectar from it. So it's described by Shukadev Goswami that there are 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atra Sarga Visargascha Stanam Poshanam Tayaha Manvantara Isha Anukata Nirada Muktirashrayaha. So there are 10 topics in the Srimad Bhagavatam, starting with Atra Sarga. Sarga means creation. Every living entity is inquiring, every human being is inquiring how this universe was created. The scientists are also thinking, how were we created? They have their Big Bang theory and their string theory and so forth. So everybody is inquiring as to what is creation. Ad prasarga visargaschas. Visarga means secondary creation. And so it's understood that the Lord creates everything in terms of the fundamental elements, and that the living entities, starting with Brahma, create a secondary creation, which is called visarga. Ad prasarga visargascha. So Brahma's creation is called visarga, and Mahavishnu's creation is called sarga. So Ad prasarga visargascha. Stanam. Stanam means the planetary positions and the positions of living entities. This word stan, like we hear Pakistan, Afghanistan, this is that same root. Stana means the place where the living entities are appearing. So every living entity is placed accordingly to exactly where the Lord wants him to be. And so this stanam is the topic of the 5th canto. Why living entities are incarnating in the places they're incarnating. And we can take wisdom from each one of these topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. This stanam is that every living entity is exactly where they're supposed to be. Stanam poshanam. Poshanam means the Lord's protection, protection of the Lord, which our acharyas say is mainly spoken about in the 6th canto. Even though we think about the 7th canto with Shringadev, but Stanam Poshanam Uttayaha. Uttayaha means the impetus for action. This is spoken about in the 7th canto. Why did Hiranyakashipu act the way he acted? Why did Prahlad act the way he acts? Why do living entities in different varnas and ashrams act the way they do? This is the topic of the 7th canto. Manvantara. So what are the Manvantaras? Who are the Manus, and what is the administrations of the universe? This is universal politics. If you're interested in politics, you can get into Bhagavatam politics. So this is Manvantaras, different Manus, different administrators, different demigods. And in this way, we learn about the great devotees that existed in these various Manvantaras. Isha Anukata means the science of God. Isha Anukata, the science of God. Kata means like to speak, and Isha means God, and Anukata means very scientific. Isha Anukata. Nirado, this is destruction. Nirado is destruction. Mukti, liberation, and Ashraya means the ultimate shelter, which is the 10th canto. That's Krishna. So these 10 topics exist in Srimad Bhagavatam. You have creation, secondary creation, the positions of living entities, the protection of the Lord, the Manus, the science of God, the destruction of the universe, liberation, and the ultimate shelter. So our acharyas describe these in different ways. They describe that each canto is one of the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they also describe that each canto has all the topics. I tend to feel more that each canto has all the topics, but there are definitely cantos that imbibe it more than the other. Just like the third canto and second canto really deal with sarga and visarga, and we're hearing creation of the fourth order literally means visarga, meaning we're hearing about Brahma's creation, how the living entities from Brahma created the universe as we see it today. And we get a big glimpse into that in terms of we hear about Brahma, and from Brahma comes Swayambhuva Manu, and Swayambhuva Manu had 5 children. He had Uttanapad, Priyavrata, Akuti, Prashuti, and Devahuti. And so we hear about all of those people's progeny. We're hearing about the progeny of Uttanapad right now, starting with Dhruva, and we've been on this Uttanapad's progeny the entire 4th canto. And then in the 5th canto, we hear about Priyavrata's progeny. In the 3rd canto, we heard about Devahuti's progeny. We heard briefly about Prashuti and Akuti also in the beginning of the 4th canto, because Prashuti is the former wife of Daksha. And Akuti is the wife of one of the great sages. So we're hearing about how Daksha, he makes his resurrection, he comes back, and he is going to attempt to redeem himself after his Shiva incident. So Daksha is coming back in the Chakshusha Manu. And I'll make this point that, one of the ways Chakshusha Manu is significant is because Lord Vraha appeared in the Chakshusha Manu, and he also appeared in the Swayambhuva Manu. And when we hear the story of Lord Vraha in the 3rd canto, we're hearing it combined. Maitreya Muni is combining the story of Vraha into two different stories into one story. He's saying there's Rakta Vraha, red Vraha, and there's white Vraha, Sweta Vraha, and they're combined into one story. But actually they're 2 different Vrahas. All our acharyas say that, because in the Swayambhuva Manu incident, we hear about Swayambhuva Manu in the 3rd canto. He's saying, I can't create because the earth is in the ocean. And so Swayambhuva Manu can't create. There's no scope of any of his progeny, including Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, all of these entities being present. So then Vraha came and lifted the earth out. And then later on the Chakshusha Manu, we hear the incidents of Lord Nrsingadev and Vrahadev are taking place. So this is all history relevant to the Lord. The reason we want to hear about these Manus and these different administrations of the universe is because their history is relevant to the Lord. So I want to speak a little bit about Daksha, because that's what we're being spoken of here, and his return. And this is all mentioned again in the 8th canto, how these Manvantaras work. And so one of the important things to understand, this is your Bhakti Vaibhav test question for the day. One of the important things to understand about the Manvantaras is that each new Manu comes with a new administration of universal controllers. You get a new Manu, and a Manu reestablishes the 4 parts of Dharma on the earth. Manu is in charge of the law, the way human beings live. That's why we have the Manu Samhita, which is the basic human laws, very, very practical laws on marriage, on inheritance, and these types of things, the Manu Samhita. And so this is what Manu's purpose is. He's the king of humankind. Manu literally means man. That's where the word man comes from. And the very first Manu was Swayambhuva Manu. And he was also the very first entity that was reproducing in a sexual way. Previously, Lord Brahma was having all these mental children, and he was trying to get them to populate, but there was not very much population increasing. And so then finally, Swayambhuva Manu appeared, and his wife, Shatarupa, appeared. And they were very submissive to Lord Brahma. He was pleased with them. And so then they said, okay, well, you reproduce. And they reproduced, and their children came. And then their children were married after the various daughters of the sages. So then new devatas
a whole new set of demigods comes into being when there's a new Manu, not counting Brahma, Shiva, or Vishnu, but all the other demigods, Indra and all of his associates, Agni, Soma, they're all replaced every Manu, a whole new set of demigods, and they share in the results of sacrifices. And therefore, Krishna says, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity shall reign for all. So these demigods, they play a universal role, and every Manu, they shift. There's a new Indra every Manu. Our current Indra is named Purandar. Fun fact. Purandar, yeah. Yeah. Also, the Manu Putras, there's a whole different set of sons of Manu. Naturally, if there's a new Manu, there's a different sons of Manu. And the sons of Manu are, also administrating to the world as kings. There's a new Indra. Also, there's a new set of 7 sages, because this is how the population repopulates each Manu. The 7 sages have daughters, and they're also progenitors, and they're establishing Sanatan Dharma, and they're establishing the process of sacrifice, karmakanda, and so forth. And there's also another incarnation of the Lord that appears every Manu. It's called a Manu incarnation, or a Manu avatar. Each Manu of the 14, there's a new incarnation of the Lord that appears with each Manu. So those 6 things change every single Manu. The Manus, the Devas, the Manu Putras, or the sons of Manu, the supreme demigod Indra, the Rishis, the 7 sages, and the Amsa avatar, the Manu avatar. They all change every single Manu. So it's very nice. So now, going to the story of Daksha, we know about Daksha. He was one of the mental sons of Lord Brahma, and he was ordered to be a progenitor, and he was eager to do so. However, being a Brahmana, being very beautiful, being very wealthy, he became very puffed up with pride, and in his arrogance, way back at the beginning of the 4th canto, in his arrogance, he offended Lord Shiva. How did he do that? Do you remember?
Dishonored him.
How?
Yeah, he didn't let him be part of the sacrifice.
Yeah, because not that he refused to greet him. Lord Shiva refused to stand up for Daksha. So Lord Daksha became very angry, and then Daksha began hurling insults at Lord Shiva. What did Lord Shiva do?
What is it?
No, he just left. Lord Shiva just left.
Oh, yeah.
Lord Shiva just left. I don't need to do with this. And then he was having a peaceful life with Sati, but Sati saw that all her sisters and her friends were flying to Daksha's yajna. She said, I want to go. And Lord Shiva said, don't go. And so then she went anyways. And then Daksha insulted Lord Shiva and didn't greet her. And so Sati decided to have a fiery tantrum, and she self-immolated herself. And that made Lord Shiva very angry. Lord Shiva pulled a piece of his dreadlock out, threw it on the ground. And then we hear about, what's the demon's name? Virabhadra, I think. Came out, chopped everybody's head off, chopped off Daksha's head, and threw it in the fire. And Daksha got a goat head. We know all about that. So Daksha was repentant after this incident, and he repented to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva was like, it's okay, but still Daksha had a goat head, which was not a very pleasant situation for him. So he left that body, performed austerities to then regain his position as a progenitor. And so we're going to hear about that now. So in the 6th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, all of these events are going to be retold, including the events of the Prachetas. You'll hear about this again. So we're hearing about the Prachetas now. The Prachetas, they were the sons of Prachinibari. Then they went to perform austerity. And while performing austerity, Prachinibari was convinced by Narada Muni via the story of Paranjana to leave home and become a sadhu, become liberated. So then the prachetas wake up and they're very angry at the trees because the trees have overgrown everything. And so they start destroying all the trees with their fire breathing power. And Lord Brahma comes down and says, don't do that. And actually Soma comes down. Soma comes down, the moon god. Don't do that. Here, take this daughter of the trees. Because Soma had a baby with this Pramlocha Apsara. And this Pramlocha Apsara had a baby, Marisha. And Marisha was then offered to the prachetas as a wife by the trees. She was raised by the trees. And then in the life of the prachetas, Marisha, they begot Daksha. Daksha's second incarnation. And so then Daksha, this is so many years later, because the first events of Daksha take place in the very beginning of time. Way in the beginning of time. In the beginning of the fourth canto. And now we're way up in the Chakshusha Manu. There's been whole Manus that have shifted since this time. So here we're in this Chakshusha Manu now. And so what does Daksha do? This is described in the sixth canto. Daksha is going to go into what's called the Hamsaguya prayer because he wants to perform austerities to be able to create. So Daksha starts off by creating entities from his mind because he's very powerful. So from Daksha's mind comes many demons, many devas, humans, birds, beasts, and so many other things. But even though he's creating all these things with his mind, it's just that there was no population increase. Population was not increasing. So he was feeling this is not working. So unable to perform his service, what does he do? He takes shelter of austerity. He takes shelter of prayer. And so he goes into this great penance and great austerity where he sings these beautiful prayers called the Hamsaguya prayers, which he didn't write, but they're famous prayers in the Vedas. And so then Daksha sang these Hamsaguya prayers. And very powerful prayers. And so after the end of the Hamsaguya prayers, the Lord appears to him. He's very happy. He hears these prayers. And the Lord blesses him. He says, accept this Ashikini, this daughter of the Prajapati Panchajanya as your wife. So the Lord is now saying, take this girl as your wife. Unite her in sexual life, and you will be able to beget hundreds of children in her womb to increase the population. So previously, his mental children just weren't doing it. And so therefore, he now has a wife whom he can have sexual relations with, and now in this way, increase the population. And so this is described by our acharyas that this is the result of Daksha's offense to Lord Shiva. Because Daksha had just had all these beautiful prayers to the Lord, and then he saw the Lord. The Lord came to him in an 8-armed form on Garuda with all the demigods present. And so generally, if someone sees the Lord, we think that they're going to end up like Dhruva. Dhruva wanted so many things, but then when he saw the Lord, all of those material desires were completely banished. But Daksha, we're not seeing the same circumstance. Daksha is also seeing darshan of the Lord, and this grand, opulent, beautiful darshan. Why is Daksha not becoming purified? Now he's going to have thousands and thousands of children. And so our acharyas say that though the Lord mercifully showed Daksha his form, he cast Daksha onto the path of karma and material enjoyment, and not into the sweet ocean of his prema. That is because the influence of his offense to the great devotee Shiva had not been completely removed. So we may see the Lord, we may have this beautiful darshan, but we won't necessarily be able to access that prema because of offenses. Dhruva was faultless. Dhruva was following the instructions of Narada, whereas Daksha was recovering from this offense to Lord Shiva, and therefore, even though he got darshan of the Lord, he performed such austerities. Instead of getting prema, he just got karma kanda. The Lord blessed him to be expert at karma kanda and to enjoy material life to the highest degree. But actually understand that this isn't a blessing. So when I first became a devotee, I was going to this devotee's house. He had these Jagannath deities. And I They were there, but I swear I never saw them. I was like in the temple room, but I have no memory of them. I just remember like a blank altar in my mind. Because I was so impure, the Lord wouldn't let me see him. I'm serious. I have no memory of it. I don't remember seeing Jagannath until I started coming here, or sometime later reading some books after I'd been thoroughly purified by pain. But I had no I have no memory of seeing these deities. I know that he had these big Jagannath deities, but they weren't there in my mind. Because it was just, we can't see. So in this way, Daksha was unable to have that prema. So we also have to be very careful and remember that we're overcoming offenses to Vaishnavas, that here we are, Daksha committed an offense in the Swayambhuva Manvantar, and he's still recovering from it in the Chakshusha Manvantar. So this is a big warning that don't commit offenses because you may be recovering from them literally millions and millions and millions and millions of years down the line. Daksha's still engaged in the same old chewing the chewed. Of course, he offended Lord Shiva, and he got a pure devotee. Commit suicide is kind of a heavy offense, but anyways, we can't mess around. So then Lord Krishna continues to speak to Daksha. He says, yes, accept this Ashikini, the daughter of Prajapati Panjajanya, as your wife. Unite with her in sexual life, and you will be able to beget hundreds of children in her womb to increase the population. Then he says, your children will also be captivated by Maya and will engage like you in sex. However, because of my mercy, they will offer presentations to me in devotion. So this is kind of a method to create and expand the material energy that we see that Brahma was creating, and he was struggling to get the population going until Swayambhuva Manu, who was the very first human being who reproduced sexually, and then the human race and the population of the world began to increase. So similarly, in this instant, we see that Daksha was also creating so many entities from his mind, but it was not significantly increasing the population in the Chakshusha Manu. And so he meets this girl, he marries this girl, and now he's going to have many children with her. And so then the Lord disappeared, as if he were an object experienced in a dream. So then next, we hear about a very famous incident that happened with Daksha, where Daksha commits his second great offense to a great devotee, who is Narada Muni. Daksha is going to offend Narada Muni. And so Daksha has many sons, and he has many sons that are called the Haryashwas. He has these sons called the Haryashwas. He has 10,000 sons. And so they went to the place called Narayanasaras in the west to perform austerities. And they performed many austerities there, living very, very intense spiritual lives, to perform austerities similarly to the Prachetas who were performing austerities for the sake of being able to be proper leaders in society, who then were given the mercy of Lord Shiva and in that way liberated. The Harishwas, they also went to perform austerity under the order of their materialistic father Daksha, and in that process, they became greatly purified. And upon seeing their purity, the great sage Narada Muni thought, wow, they're worthy for liberation. And he came and did his thing. He started preaching to them and telling them that Krishna is the absolute truth and that they should simply surrender to Krishna. So Narada approaches them and he tells them an allegory, and that allegory is a whole different class in itself, but it involves, the dark well analogy and so many different things. It's a very heavy bit of allegory that he's going to get there. I'll give you some little wisdom bits here.
It's those sons that then decide, okay, we're not gonna.
Yeah, then they all became sannyasis, essentially. They all became sannyasis and they went back to Godhead. And so they all reach the same conclusion. This is the conclusion we should all reach, that when we're hearing Krishna consciousness philosophy spoken by Acharyas, Narada Muni, this is his philosophy, we should renounce fruitive activity. And so Daksha laments the renunciation of the Harishwas, and Aprad Brahma's advice begets 1,000 more sons. So they're called the Savalashwas. And they go and they also perform austerities. And then Narada Muni, being the ambitious preacher he is, he also thinks, let me preach to these boys here. And this is how we should also be. My Guru Maharaj often says, he says, I smelled blood in the water, like a shark. If someone's somewhat ready for Krishna consciousness, you go for it. You preach to them. And he gives many examples of this. One example was my god sister Mohini Kishori, very nice devotee. She was coming for a while. She was married to another devotee here, but she was not so into Krishna consciousness. And then there were some challenges, and then somehow she started to like my Gurudev. And my Gurudev says, I took every opportunity to preach to her, and she became a very nice devotee. Became a very, very nice devotee. There's many instances like that, in terms of all the preachers of Krishna consciousness. So naturally, he preached to them. They also decide, let me become sannyasis. And so then Daksha, he's now aged. He became super angry and criticizes Narada Muni as a sadhu. He says, you're an asadu, meaning you're not a saint. You're an asadu. And he says, you're a papi, you're sinful. So he criticizes him in so many ways. And his argument is that knowledge and personal experience will lead to detachment and not due to the mind being changed by others. And sometimes we hear that. Many of the brahmacharis in India talk about that, when because the parents are, no, get married, they want, and so some of these brahmacharis, they, went against the will of their parents and they became married. And one of the brahmacharis, one of my teachers who was teaching me Srimad Bhagavatam, he was saying that his father said that also, that, you have to experience all of the suffering before you renounce. Also, the married sannyasi who Lord Chaitanya met on the way to Shantipur in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda were going to Shantipur, and they came across one married sannyasi, and he blessed Lord Chaitanya to have unlimited material enjoyment. And Lord Chaitanya said, why are you cursing me like that? And he became very angry. He said, what do you know, little boy? Who you think you are? I've traveled all around, and it's well known that one should experience, go through the ashrams first and then renounce. And so Lord Nityananda calmed him down, and they had a nice meal together, only to run away when the wine came out. So Daksha cursed Narada Muni. He says, I forgave you once, but not going to forgive you again. What was the curse? Can't stay anywhere longer than 3 days. And Srila Prabhupada in the commentary says, I've also been cursed by the parents of my disciples. But it's okay because we're following the footsteps of Narada Muni. So, saintly Narada, although capable, did not counter the curse of Daksha, but accepted his curse. So Narada Muni then accepted that curse and is still to this day continuously preaching, traveling and preaching. So there's a lot of lessons here. One is that all the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam are important, including this switch of manus. And so each manu gives us a new set of devatas, a new set of rishis, a new Indra, a new set of manu putras. There's a new set of administrations that happen each manu, a new set of demigods. And so it's important to know that. It's important to know these things because they help us to understand the position we're in. And having this kind of worldview, when you understand the nature of the universe and these Manus, the nature of the higher planets. When you understand these things, it gives you a worldview by which you can develop Krishna consciousness. The worldview that we're given in scientific culture is not privy, it's not conducive to creating a worldview of surrender to Krishna. So Bhagavatam is giving us a worldview by which we can develop Krishna Bhakti. That's the message of Bhagavatam. That's the ultimate ashraya of Bhagavatam. We're getting a worldview that allows us to develop Krishna Bhakti, because there's so many different ways of seeing the universe. And so the Bhagavatam is presenting, the whole fifth canto is presenting this series of higher planets and lower planets. But the most important element to understand is in accepting and living in that worldview, we're giving ourselves facility, giving ourselves a situation that's conducive to surrendering to Krishna. And so then we hear about Daksha and the Hamsaguya prayers, how he, after recovering from his offense, left his body with the goat head and then was reborn to Marisha, the daughter of Soma and Pramlocha Apsara, who was raised by the trees. And the trees offered her to the Prachetas, that the Prachetas did not kill them all. And the Prachetas in them begot Daksha. So in this way, we're seeing also how this line of Dhruva Maharaj and Swayambhuva Manu, it's coming down so many years. Because the Prachetas are also descendants of Dhruva, descendants of Uttanapad, descendants of Swayambhuva Manu. And so Daksha is reincarnating in that line. And then later on in the sixth canto, you'll continue to hear how Daksha, after both groups of boys were turned into sannyasis, what did he do?
What?
Both groups of boys were turned into sannyasis. So what did he do after that?
What did Daksha do?
Yeah.
He had daughters.
He had 60 daughters. And so these 60 daughters were then married to Kasapya Muni.
That's why women can't take sannyas, because of this.
They were married to Kasapya Muni. And Kasapya Muni then essentially populated the whole earth as we know it today with the daughters of Daksha. And there's all the living entities are coming from Kasapya Muni. And so then we hear then from Kasapya Muni, who was born, two very powerful characters were born. Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, they were born from Kasapya Muni. And therefore, this is why the events happening in the third canto about Vraha have to be two separate Vrahas. Because Swayambhuva Manu is present for the Vraha lifting the earth out of the ocean. Yet, Kasapya Muni and Daksha, this is way, way down the line. And Kasapya Muni is the father of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. So the Nila Vraha, who's also Rakta Vraha, it's kind of a weird thing. But Nila Vraha, the blue Vraha, who also turns red, is the one who killed Hiranyaksha. And the Sweta Vraha is the Vraha who lifted the earth out of the ocean. So there are two Vraha incarnations.
They didn't happen in the same instance.
No. Although Maitreya Muni told them as they were one.
Yeah, so it's actually two separate stories.
Two separate stories, he combined them into one story. That's the conclusion of the Acharyas, because otherwise how could it be? That's why Swayambhuva Manu was present. And there's also in other parts of the Bhagavatam, it speaks about the white Vraha and the blue Vraha. But we hear that Swayambhuva Manu was present, and he was complaining to Brahma that the earth's in the ocean, I can't create. And so then Vraha lifted it out. And then later on.
I heard so many times in that story where it was like the earth got in the ocean because
Hiranyaksha. That's also true. Hiranyaksha also put the earth in the ocean. And that's why Braha appeared, to get the earth out of the ocean. But in both instances, he was doing that same pastime, but in one instance, he was fighting. And there's actually another place, and this is all things I've learned in Bhakti by Baba, but there's another place in one of the Puranas. It's described that Swayambhuva Manu was cursed by one of the sages. I should really go find that reference, but there's a reference where Swayambhu Manu was cursed by one of the sages to have to experience a annihilation in his lifetime. So therefore the earth was covered with water. But Lord Vishnu and Lord Brahma, desiring to continue creation, lifted him out. So yeah, these 60 daughters were married off to Kasapi Muni, and from Kasapi Muni came the population we have today. And therefore, when a devotee is initiated, and then in India this is a big deal, you know, when people get married, initiated devotees are called, you know, they're part of the Achyuta Gotra. People are always asking, what's your Gotra? So initiated devotees are part of the Achyuta Gotra, meaning we're in the family of Vishnu. But when Padma Rukmini and Bala Gopinath were getting married, they said, oh, Bala Gopinath is in the Achyuta Gotra because he's initiated. But because Padma Rukmini wasn't initiated yet, she was still Bhakti and Tatyana, they said, you're part of the Kasapya Gotra, meaning. Okay, we'll end here. Any questions or comments? Yeah? No? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
I did have a question earlier, but I